Sorry.
I can go. Okay. So, if it works.
That should be good. All good.
Yeah. Oh. Still not, but I can do it on the computer directly. Okay. I try again. Here we are. Okay. So I will start with a very short few words about the project because that's the last year now. And our strong point today is one word, feliciciter, a strange word at the end of Mark in Codex Bobbiensis. And we go also a little bit see Codex VALERIANUS and just a short word at the end about Washingtonianus, like an appetizer before the lunch. And also because it's based on a forthcoming article co-written with Regis Burnet, so it will be the final appetizer of the day. So MARK16, you have the website here. The team is composed today by Priscille Marshall, Elisa Nouri, Sylvain Walda, and myself. And we are very grateful to Mina Monnier, now presently in position in Oslo, who was a strong worker in the project, and also to Jonathan Barda. And now we have a manuscript room with 60 items in 11 ancient languages with the end of Mark. And please go and use it, look at it, in partnership with Münster, of course. And all the data are stored in a good, fair way about two open public repositories, the French one, Nakala, CNRS, and Dash, that's the Swiss one. We have also put now our data on Dash. And the project has 26 publications so far. You get everything on the website. For your common interest, I'm pleased to announce the publication, forthcoming publication of the next issue of Const Bulletin, Hamburg, and that's the results, part of the results of our conference 1 year ago, with 90 articles and several people you know. I'm sure we have here a turning point about MARK16 and more things to discuss afterwards. It will be a session at the SBL in November about MARK16. So we just opened a new box, I would say. And the important point to keep in mind is that we have no Greek version of MARK16 before the 4th century. So it opens several gates. And that we are speaking about Vaticanus and Sinaiticus of re-editions of Mark. And as you will see in these collected issues, our colleagues have a lot of new ideas. So box open and we'll see what will come in the next year afterwards, after the project MARK16. So today, our 2 points are as I say, the main point is this strange feliciciter that you just see here on the screen, but you can go on our manuscript room and really look at the image. And also the CORONIS at the end of the Codex Washingtonianus that is very, very seldomly commented. Regarding the Codex Bobbiensis, it has raised new interest in the recent years, and you have here 2 articles by Larsen and myself, and I announce also 2 forthcoming other articles about Bobbiensis, and 1 in the collected essay I have mentioned. So everything is on the slides, and I have chosen to put the slides in the open file, so you can find all the information with all the references in the file available. You don't need to know them. So the folio 41b of the Codex Bobbiensis is behind the end of Mark. So that's probably a very pragmatical reason for which it was seldom commented, because it's behind. Nevertheless, Hugh told something about it in his 2016 book. Additional material is frequently added to the explicit. In VL1 and VL13, it's recorded that Mark ends happily explicit feliciter. In VL13, it is written in Greek letters. So I have to slightly disagree with you. In fact, it's not Mark that ends happily, but Matthew that starts happily. And I refer here to an article by Simon Gaffercole, who also commented the point, and who was referring to 61 article by Revilo Oliver, giving several examples of the formula. You have it transcribed by Tracy Marshall, Evangelium Cata Marcum explicit at the end of Mark, Incipit Cata Matteum feliciciter, and Matthew starts feliciciter. You have here in the article of 1951 two examples by Livy, Titus Livius, of two inscriptions at the end of books that exactly indicate the same. One book ends and the next one starts. So now two observations about this famous feliciciter that sounds first glance like a mistake. Is it or not? That's the point. But before to go to that, I take time to look with you to the formula. The scribe has been inspired by previous mentions in Latin literature and has applied it, demonstrating he or she was understanding it. And the link to Tite-Live, to Livy, is really interesting because you remember maybe the P13 papyrus that has Hebrews, several passages, written on the verso of the history of Rome by Livy. And here we are at the 3rd century, category 1. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So that's the papyrus 13 with history of Rome and on the verso Hebrews. So it's in the air to look at such text. Now, I think we have really important element there. With attention to this formula, we can first confirm the order in Bobbiensis, Mark, then Matthew. It has been masterly demonstrated by David Parker, that we will see this slide, in an article that remains for me something absolutely great, because when David wrote this article, the first version, it was in 91, almost nobody or very few people were interested in Codex Bobbiensis. And in the middle of nowhere, David published an amazing article about it, and he demonstrated clearly in this article that Wordsworth was right against Tischendorf, and that we had indeed Matthew after Mark, a very special case here. And now, if we pay attention to the final expression of this folio 41b, it's clear that for the scribe, it ends Mark and then turns to Matthew. And we have also the confirmation here that for the scribe, at least, the shorter ending is the end of Mark. No hesitation, it's clearly the case. So now the word feliciciter. Did the scribe made a mistake? Here we have a digital humanities issue. Why? Because if we look at all the database we have, Lila, Source Chrétien, Library of Latin Text, l'Année philologique, you, of course, you won't find feliciciter, and you don't have a chance to find it. Why? Because the words are normalized, because databases are functioning with ontologies. So mistakes are normally not in such a database. So of course, I didn't find nothing about feliciciter in the databases. But, and here it begins to be interesting, one finds later uses of feliciciter, and I was the first surprised about that. For example, in a letter of 1287, Facta pie et feliciciter ac simpliciter propter deum, you can find it online. But also several examples, and really several examples in early printed text. Here I thank Elisa Nouri for this reference. It's an incunabula, end of the 15th century, feliciciter, you see it at the top left corner. Then you have a quite famous case in a title of Erasmus, Julius. So it's written feliciciter, and the Library of Basel apparently was a little bit uncomfortable, but has kept, fortunately, the word like thick Latin feliciciter. So And I've even found a case in a Latin French dictionary, 18th, 17th century, with feliciciter in the definition. So apparently not a mistake there in the definition. So I have personally no real explanation about the cases in early printing text. I can only tell they are there. And it maybe means that these authors have found it in some manuscript. No idea about that. But we can go, fortunately, a little bit further. Here you have the page of Wordsworth edition, and surprisingly, he does not any comment about feliciciter. Normally, he always indicates when there is a mistake, what Tischendorf was telling and the others, but no comment at all. You have the footnote here about feliciciter. And he didn't correct it, neither. He has let it like that. Running into the entire book that is really full of treasures, I can just advise to go back again and again to Wordsworth. We find some clues. Wordsworth is commenting in Matthew an expression specific to the Codex Bobbiensis, Magnus, Magnus vocatur. Twice, Magnus, Magnus. For the people who knows, it's Matthew 5:9. For the people who know quite well the Codex Bobbiensis, you know that we have often double words or double expression. And Wordsworth does here the following proposition. Maybe it is a way to tell a lot. And he refers to Runish and to some inscription. So I have tried to check everything for you. I tried as I could. So Wordsworth has some doubts. First, he's trying to tell, okay, it could be a scribe's error or lithography, but it's not also possible that it may be a vernacular form of superlative. The example cited by Runish seems sufficient to establish its use. It's true that all these examples are taken from inscriptions, but it's just in inscriptions where vernacular speech comes out that analogies should be thought for the old Latin. If we go now to Runish, indeed, we find the uses on the left corner, and he refers himself to Jean Gruter, and here we are still earlier, 1616. And finally, I have found the famous inscription where you have apparently double letters for felicis, felicis to tell felicissimi, or merenti, merenti, merentissimo, or fortis, fortis, fortissimi, and pep for piissimo. That's the example used by Wordsworth for his explanation. Should we convince by that? Maybe yes, maybe not. It's just one inscription, but nevertheless, it is an interesting case. I needed to go further to be convinced myself, but I did. First, as I told before, in Codex Bobbiensis, we have several cases of repetition. Here, just before, on the folio 41R, in the shorter ending, you have on line 11 and 12, ab oriente usque usque in orientem. It's a well-known case with 2 times usque and a mistake, ab orientem, and in orientem, 2 times orient and 2 times usque. Should we correct, or should we consider it's a way to really insist on? That's more or less a similar case. So well known in Codex Bobbiensis. And very interesting argument noted by Wordsworth is that in Matthew, the Codex Bobbiensis uses felices instead of beati in the Beatitudes. And Wordsworth confirmed that this use is found by Cyprian, Tertullian, and Operatus. And he considers, what can agree or not, Wordsworth proposes that felices would be instead the very first Latin reading for beati in the Beatitudes. I was really pleased to read that, because at this point, it starts to have Matthew starting very happily, or something like that. And in short, a copy of early Latin scribal practice are used and confirm that we have this formula at the end of Bobbiensis. Feliciciter is not an isolated mistake, but a seldom use, nevertheless, as then attested elsewhere. At least one ancient inscription attests to a double felicis felicis for felicissimi. The double syllabus CC is not so surprising in the global framework of Bobbiensis. And VL1 attests of a special felicitas accent in the Matthean Beatitudes. These observations support or could support the hypothesis of an action put on feliciciter. What one can say is that feliciciter slightly reformulates the well-known scribal formula. And here, this reading could be confirmed by the case of Codex Valerianus. I jumped to it. It was pointed by Hugh in the quotation I gave at the start. So here we are later, 6th or 7th century. And you see at the end of Mark, this strange way to go back to explicate feliciter with Greek and one Latin letter in the middle. We have an edition of this codex, and just behind the last part of Mark, you have this fine, rich colophon commented by the first editor in 88. And in the center of the cross, you have the scribe speaking, ego Valerianus scripsi. And although the attestation that it was the final colophon of the 4 Gospels, Finit, Liber, Sancti, Evangelii, Dicta, etc. So it was the end of the 4 Gospels. But afterwards, the codex was rebound. And as White tells, the binder being unable to appreciate the order in which the Gospels were placed, the usual Old Latin order, Matthew, John, Luke, and Mark, tried to rearrange them in the order familiar to us, or at any rate to bring in St. John at the end. But fortunately, he has kept this folio and all the writing. It was, so it allows us to enjoy this reformulation of the classical formula. And you see it that we are a step further because it is condensed explicate feliciter. So the end, happy end. And here we have indeed a happy end of Mark in Codex Valerianus, and in Codex Bobbiensis, it's a happy start of Matthew. We have still another case of rebound codex after Mark. It's a Coptic SR 102, page 197. We just put it a few days ago at the manuscript room. And Schussler in 2007 points that we have a colophon erased at the end of Mark. And he does the supposition that the colophon was erased at the moment of rebound of the codex. But apparently, according to Schlusser, this codex was also ending by Mark and with a colophon explaining it. So we have several traces to think about what happens at the end of Mark, how it goes with the next writing or not, and when it's happening when Codex has rebound. And the appetizer before lunch, final CORONIS in Codex Washington. Here you have the reference of the forthcoming article for more. And it's very surprising because the final sentence, the colophon sentence below the subscription title has been often commented since the very beginning of the finding of the codex, but not the corona. And it's still the case in this very new book, 2022, by Megan Leith Burnett. And she is commenting the final sentence, Holy Christ be with your servant Timothy and all the ones with him. And she argues quite a lot about Timothy, the name, and so on. But not a word about the CORONIS, the drawing, like more or less like an H here. Thanks to Tommy Wasserman for the reference. We have some words just in a footnote by Karl Nordenfalk, 70. Is slightly mentioned, I have forgotten A in Anschriften, I apologize. he just mentioned the coroner in Codex Washington, telling it could be aus der Zeit des Hieronymus. That would be very early for this codex of the 4th century, but nothing more. Fortunately, we have a full article with quite a strong passage by Gwendoline Stephen about the CORONIS, and she looked a little bit what happens in Codex Washington, and it's fascinating because we have 3 CORONIS with a verb. You see this nice verb. It's at the end of John. So at the end of Matthew, Luke, and John, we had a CORONIS with a verb, and they are ancient CORONIS. But at the end of Mark, the CORONIS is different. And Gwendoline Stephen argues that based on the 3 bird CORONIS and the stylized CORONIS at the end of Mark, so not the same, GA 032 can be considered as an intermediate step in the evolution of CORONIS. I let you think about that, and you have all the sentence of Gwendoline Stephen here. But of course, if it's true, if she's correct with this observation, it could mean that the date of Codex Washington could be also considered with this element. And personally, and Regis Burnet as well, in our forthcoming article, we agree with Orsini datation for Mark, the first half of the 5th century. And then you have still more arguments to go in that direction. So if now we reach the end of this paper with all this example of ends in manuscripts, and as final word to celebrate the 75th anniversary of EGNTP, I would say that I'm a New Testament scholar, but I am basically, I'm full happy about what we live now, because New Testament studies are again an editorial field. And I would have not thought that 30 years ago or 20 years ago, but now we are back to the manuscript. We love our manuscript. We read our manuscript, starts, ends, comments, glosses, drawings, survey, washing with the end. So we are again an editorial field on our matter. And for me, that's the strongest sign of a alive New Testament field in the next years. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clivaz. Very, a feliciciter. We have some time for questions for lunch, so if anybody has any, like there is.
I'm just going to say thank you. I've added it to my list of college agenda.
But in Birmingham, we have happy starts and happy endings, so everything's fine.
I had a question. You mentioned that felicicus was used in the place of beati in Matthew. Is that correct? Or beatus?
Yeah.
Is it possible?
Codex Bobbiensis,
Yes.
And
Is it possible that the use of feliciciter would be more like most blessed in that sense?
yes, it is my guess. I think we cannot be sure about that, but when I look at all the elements, I would be tempted to say indeed the scribe is studied at the accent because he knows the gratitude with Paratext and feliciciter is matching.
I mean, I've just fill in by saying, I mean, you could also translate it luckily, but I felt Markan's luckily.
So you can choose between Valerianus and Codex Bobbiensis.
Okay, if we have no more questions, then we will be having lunch in 5 minutes or so by our out. Thank you, everybody, for this afternoon, and we'll see you all after lunch.